So the question I asked today, what's the difference between consciousness and unconsciousness? The simple answer, of course, is one is conscious, one is not conscious. But we really don't think about all these things is when the people are conscious, flowers are alive, and suddenly the flower dies and we throw it away. A person that we were interacting with a full heart, and suddenly something happens. Person dies, becomes unconscious. In our definition of unconsciousness means consciousness is never going to come back. That's the end of the consciousness. So what do? We burn the body. So our relationship, while that person was alive, was with the body. We always thought that that body is that person, right? But now the same body is still there, but the consciousness is gone. So what do? We burn it away. Our relationship was it with the consciousness or the body? That's the question. So that, if you really try to analyze, that body was dependent on the consciousness to look alive, look conscious. So consciousness was borrowed. Whether he intentionally wanted it or not, that's a different story. But while he or she was alive, the consciousness was not his own consciousness, not of the body. The body was dependent on the consciousness. So the question is, what's the difference between consciousness and unconsciousness? Whatever is unconscious that we call seems to be conscious, even though we call it conscious, is not conscious. The body is not conscious by itself. It is dependent on the consciousness to look alive. So that is the main gamut of difference. But if you look at the consciousness itself, it's not dependent on anything. It is just dependent on itself. So this Sansar, as we know the Sansar, is made out of people, objects, situations. Everything is acted upon by combination of various so-called conscious people and objects, and their interactions creates the situations. But if you really try to analyze in a very broad sense, everything and everybody is dependent on consciousness. So dependence is built into the Sansar. Dependence is what defines Sansar. That we all are dependent on the consciousness to remain alive so that we can interact with each other, we can talk to each other, we can like each other, we can hate each other, we can whatever we want to do in Sansar, we can do it as long as we have the consciousness available to us. If the day the consciousness is gone, we cannot do that. A dead body cannot steal. A dead body cannot love. Dead body cannot have desires, cannot have this, cannot have that, nothing. So this is where we try to analyze the difference of our approach to the Sansar. When we love someone, we are loving their consciousness. Consciousness meaning their thoughts, their beliefs, but all still under the effect of consciousness. Even thoughts, even the beliefs, even the likes and dislikes, their hatred, greed, all these are dependent only on one thing, the consciousness. So we label people that he is like this and she is like that, but ultimately it's the play of consciousness. So if we start realizing this, that starts stirring something in our minds, that what is ours? There is really nothing ours. A husband and wife, for example, wife is, say, dependent on husband for because he's making a living. But then what is he dependent on? He's dependent on his boss so that he stays in the job, so that flow of the money keeps on going. Again, he's dependent. Boss is dependent too, maybe on his CEO or the whoever is on the top of the company. They are all dependent on one guy or one committee, whatever. But then they are also dependent on consumers. They make their products and consumers have to buy. If the consumers don't buy, the whole company collapses. So the dependence is crisscrossed within the Sansar. Everybody is dependent on something. Everybody is walking on the earth. We are dependent on the earth. If the earth disappears, and it does, sometimes they have earthquake, that is the biggest shock it can happen to you, because you took the earth for granted that it's always going to be there. No matter how much high I jump or fall or whatever, or I have bad sleep or good sleep, or I'm busy, I'm running, or I'm just going for a stroll, the earth will be always there. But the day comes when there is earthquake and the earth starts slipping away from your that is the biggest shock. I haven't experienced, but I'm sure people who have experienced, they can tell. So all this dependence, what does it lead you to? Nowhere. We depend on each other, but that's not the life. We have to find something that is independent of all. And it's not easy, because we have developed a nature to be dependent. So very rare are the people who realize this, whether they realize it or not, but at least they believe in independence. Independence is a very beautiful attribute. And independence is not saying that, okay, I'm going to go into the jungle and I'm going to make my own living. That's not practical. Yes, you have to go to your work. You have to make a living, all that. But you realize that whatever small things you do in life, try to be independent. Whatever you want to do in life, try to do it yourself first before you become dependent on someone else as much as possible. I'm not saying, start building your own home. No, but I'm just saying small things in life, that you want to get a glass of water, don't order your wife or husband, to that matter, to go and get it like that, or your servant. You see that a lot in India. So continuous awareness of self-dependence. Whatever you want to do in life, try to do it yourself. So self-dependence, where does it help you? Self-dependence helps you even in finding the ultimate independent entity, the consciousness. So it has a bigger impact how you handle your life, how your personality revolves around. If it revolves around independence, then what's going to happen? Okay, you might read a Gita or Bhagavad or Jain Sutras or Kalpa Sutra or Tattva Sutra, whatever you read, or Quran, you will not become dependent on it. But okay, you will read it if you want to, but you always be reading with independent mind, that okay, what I'm reading, does it make sense? Whatever you listen to, whatever you read, whatever you hear, whatever you search on a Google, always keep an eye of awareness open, that okay, I don't want to be dependent on this. Who knows? The source can be wrong. Who knows? The scriptures can be wrong. Anything is possible. To take anything in a blind fashion is dependence, only because we become lazy and we don't want to find our own truth. So more so than in any field, in spirituality, that becomes the most important thing, to be independent. So whatever you learn on the spiritual path, you try to analyze it deeply. That's why I always give Shravan, Manan, and Acharan. So three three legs of the journey on the spiritual path is so important. Shravan is where you listen or you read, not just read, not just listen, anything you observe in the Sansar, you're doing a Shravan. You're gathering all this information. And then comes the Manan. Then you digest it. Then you brood over it. Does it make sense? Don't do anything until you actually start realizing that that makes sense. Because by doing that, you are creating your own self-dependence. Then you're creating your own opinion. Going, for example, veganism or even anger, for example. You want to get rid of the anger. Don't just say that, okay, everybody says anger is bad, I want to get rid of the anger. No. Go ahead. When you do the anger, when the anger comes, do the anger. But then you observe yourself. Does it make sense? Does it make you feel sorry for all the things that you have said? If it does, then your decision not to get angry again will be your decision, not because people say that you should not get angry. No. Whenever any negativity or positivity, whatever, you experience it 100%. That is another attribute. So, because when you're dependent on someone else, then that experience, you involve someone else to make that decision. Say you listen to a guru. They say, okay, I believe this, guru believes this. Then you're making yourself dependent on the guru, and the guru says something. Now he has become, in your mind at least, your partner in that joint decision. But the problem is the path of spirituality is on your own, self-dependent. Guru can come only up to a certain level. Beyond that, you have to let him go. So even guru has to be evaluated. So that's why this manan is to give yourself a rise. Rising your own awareness is becoming self-dependent. So this dependence is the ultimate mistake you can make on the path of spirituality, and of course in everyday life. Imagine husband and wife both are independent in their own way. Whatever they do want to need to do it for themselves, do it without becoming dependent. And ultimately, it comes to the point that certain points one person just cannot do. It's fine, no problem. That's what marriages are for, or friendship, or any relationship, or even a working relationship at the job. You know, if every single employee does everything possible on their own and then take an advice, then that company will always flourish. Versus everybody is dependent on everybody, and then the guy who is at the top level, who has achieved something in life, will go crazy, and the company will start, suffering. So being independent helps in all the fields, but as I said, more so in the spiritual field. So you need to be independent. You don't want to carry the scriptures or the people's advice or the guru's lectures or discourses with you. Buddha always said that when you cross the river, of course, the boat helps you cross the river, but it's time to get rid of the boat. You don't want to carry the boat with you everywhere you go, just because it was helpful to you. And that's what I'm talking about. Being dependent on something or someone else too much, it creates an issue because your progress gets hindered. That's why self-dependence is very important. So if you really analyze, everybody is dependent on something. Your body, for example, is dependent. The day you stop eating, more than a few days, you won't survive. Or you stop drinking, you're dependent on the food and the water, right? The same thing, you're breathing, your prana. So your one sheath is your food sheath. That's why they call food sheath. Your body is annamaya kosh, is dependent on the food, right? And it will become food for others. The same way your prana, this prana, you inhale. You're inhaling the oxygen that gives you the vitality and rejuvenation. So you're dependent on that. And then comes the manomaya kosh. So pranamaya kosh, annamaya kosh, pranamaya kosh, and then manomaya kosh. Manomaya kosh is mind. Mind is thoughts. Can you think without thinking of anyone? You are dependent on sansar. You always think of something, whether it's objects, people, situation, trees, nature, birds. There are millions of things to think about. But if you remove those objects and people and situation, there is nothing left to think of. So thinking, the food for the thoughts is sansar itself. So again, mind is dependent. And the higher than that is Vijnanmay Kosh, where the wisdom starts coming in. You realize this dependence. And what do? You utilize this wisdom, how to become independent of sansar. Yes, how to rise higher in your spiritual field. And you realize this dependence is not healthy. Dependence can be on objects of pleasure, alcohol, drugs, whatever, it doesn't matter. Or it could be dependence on your spouse, your wife, husband, or girlfriend, boyfriend. Doesn't matter. All this dependence is preventing my progress. The wisdom starts setting in. So yes, the wisdom sheath is above all the other sheaths, because each sheath starts expanding, because body is limited. But then pranamaya kosh is further out, the energy. That's why we can do the EKGs of people, right? Because energy field is bigger than the body field. But then mind is even more tremendously expansive, because thinks of so many different things. But the wisdom sits above, because mind still makes mistakes. Look at the Haagen-Dazs and suddenly you want to eat 25 grams of fat in one bar. Mind wants it, but wisdom says, no, I see a heart attack down the road. So wisdom is even higher. But where do you use the wisdom, right? Where do you use this Vijnanmay Kosh to operate in sansar wisely, right? Correct. So then all these forces are still dependent. So our whole existence, we are dependent, right? Our relatives, the money we make, the house we live in, or insurance we carry, and food we eat, and people we think of, and then we live with wisdom. Without wisdom, doesn't matter, we still live in the sansar. And so there is interdependence. There is only one sheath which is above all of that, is the bliss seed. The bliss seed is Anandamay Kosh. So that is where you actually realize the consciousness, which is totally independent. No matter what happens to the sansar, the consciousness remains untainted, because it's so much far above. Consciousness can exist by itself, but all the other four sheets that we have, if the consciousness is withdrawn, no matter how wise you may be, if your life force disappears, wisdom even has no value. So Krishna says that the buddhi, man, buddhi, vani, and sharir, these are all my extensions, but that's not where I reside all the time. I reside within you, in the consciousness. Krishna, the consciousness, that is independent of everything. Millions of galaxies have come and gone. Universes will come and go. Krishna says, I am the owner of crores of universes. They just play around like clouds in the sky. Sky is independent. The clouds cannot exist without the sky. Space of the emptiness of the sky is the most important. Emptiness of consciousness is the most important, in which this drama of sansar, which is the drama of interdependence, keeps on going on. So this is the whole path you need to take on spirituality, and realize what is that entity which is independent of all. And that's why they say, Nainam chedanti sastrani, Nainam dahati pauka, nacha kledyanti apoho, nacha soshyati maruttaha. The Atma cannot be cut into pieces. It cannot be burned. It cannot be wetted with the water, and it cannot be made dry with the dry winds of the desert. Nothing, it does not, nothing touches it. So that's the ultimate goal of spiritual path is to identify our innermost sheath. And like we talked last time, like a flickerless flame, which is continuously burning with all this sansar, which is swirling around, which is interdependent, but they all ultimately go around. It's the consciousness is the Krishna, and everything, everybody else are the gopis. They keep circling around the consciousness. And this is where we all need to pay our homage, devote our egos, because ego thinks that it has independent existence, but it's not. Ego is a foolishness. We think that I am above you, you are above me, this is mine, this is yours. Ego is 100% dependent on all the connection it has set up in life. Without those connections, ego will go crazy. So ego is a wrong belief that this is mine, this is yours, I am superior, I'm inferior. All those things we're carrying around is only the swirling component around the Krishna. Krishna is watching. So it's time to rise higher. So when you meditate next time, keep this in mind and always follow the one. The one is the consciousness, which is independent. And that's where you experience the ultimate freedom. So much for today.